Hello, everybody. My name is Gordon Wilson. I'm an artist living on Vancouver Island in beautiful British Columbia in Canada. Um, I'm a painter. I've been a painter all my life. I work in watercolor, gouache, and acrylic, uh, and I enjoy painting very much. I'm also a teacher, and I've taught adults and high school kids, tried to teach high school kids to paint, and all the lessons that I've learned along the way. Um, as far as where the artistic bug came from, very much on my father's side of the family, where everybody, my uncles, my father, uh, were able to draw or had the ability to draw in some way. Um, they normally didn't pursue it, although it has been passed down to my sons who are now grown up, and they possess a lot of talent that way more than I ever did. But you know, what they do with it, it's up to them. And I also have a nephew that has got that artistic bug as well. And whatever they do with that, I don't know. um, I was identified very early as an artist. You were talking like kindergarten, grade one. Somebody saw something in some drawing that I had done and took notice, and all of a sudden I was labeled as the artist in the class. I took pride in that because it was my identity. I'm basically a shy, introverted individual, and having a title like the artist really meant something to me, and it became my identity. I was always drawing or painting something. Uh, my parents always bought me art supplies for Christmas and my birthday. Those kits that have like pastels and how-to books, watercolors, and charcoal pencils that always break, and pads of paper. And I would go through those pretty fast, and try my best to learn how to make things happen. And it took a while. Early on, what really got my attention as far as types of paintings were military subjects. I've always been interested in the military, particularly the First World War. I collect uniforms from that period. So when I would see illustrations in books of that, because in those days the illustrators were portraying everything, something just clicked, and I don't know what it was. It just really inspired me to want to try to emulate these people. Illustration was a big deal in those days. I was impressed by a number of French artists. One was George Scott, not the actor. There's an S on the end of George. Jose Simon and Francois Fleming. These artists all painted in watercolor and gouache. Fortunio Matania in England, who was an illustrator, fabulous. And Charles Jeffries in Canada. Seeing these illustrations in books just knocked me flat. And I really tried hard to, and I knew how hard it was to paint in watercolor. So when I saw this stuff, I thought, wow, the possibilities are great. So I tried really, really hard, and I worked at it. Later in life, I had the opportunity to attend the Ontario College of Art in Toronto. That would be 1979, where I trained as a commercial artist to be an illustrator. This is before computers, before the internet. We studied, illustration techniques, typography, color theory, design, storyboarding, advertising. And it was quite interesting. There was also a lot of figure drawing. which was fun. And I graduated in 1983, and I went to work as a commercial illustrator in the Greater Toronto area and a layout artist, so on and so forth. I worked like that for 20 years. It was a very stressful career choice because you had to come up with ideas very fast. You had to be able to render things very quickly, and using basically markers and pencil crayons and whatever you had at your disposal. And you had a time limit, and you really had to meet that, or you wouldn't last long. I did that for 20 years, as I say. And in the year 2000, I moved on and went to teachers college and got my degree in teaching, and taught at a regional art high school in the Toronto area. It was Mayfield Secondary School, and it was a regional art school. So they had all kinds of different arts going on, and the kids there were very, very talented. So it was quite a reward, and I learned that I loved teaching at that point, and that lasted for 15 years until I retired in 2017 and moved out here. I guess what inspires me are visual stimulation. Color is just everything to me. I can see color. I've trained myself to see color where most people wouldn't. I remember a time in the Ontario College of Art, going to the library, and I found this big book on an artist named John Singer Sargent. John Singer Sargent was an Anglo-American artist, mainly doing portraiture for the wealthy and connected people in Europe and in the US. He worked in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but it wasn't really these oil portraits that got my attention. It was these watercolors that he did. To get away from painting these stiff, portraits of people, he would do watercolors and document his travels. And this man really knew how to use color. And I remember seeing a watercolor in that book. It was of a white tent on a sunny day. And I believe it was in the Rockies here in Canada on one of his trips. And his use of color to replicate light, sunlight, absolutely knocked me flat. It was one of those sort of epiphany moments where you just sort of stop and think, oh God, I have a lot to learn. Previous to that, my concept of color was, if you want to darken something, you add black. And if you want to lighten a color, you add white. Well, that thinking, is fine if you're in, grade 4, but adding black to a color is not a good thing, in my opinion. Unless you're painting a black army boot in a dark closet, in an unlit room, in a vacant house at midnight, using black really isn't going to help you out much. It actually destroys the color. And I won't get into technicalities here, but there's better ways of achieving dark colors and making them work. Generally, now that I'm a fine artist, or classified as such, landscapes were the obvious sort of genre to go into. Uh, in this regard, I was inspired by, there was a Canadian group called the Group of Seven, and they existed in the early 20th century. And they took the skills that were being taught in France at the time and applied them to Canadian subject matter, in specifically north of Toronto in Ontario. Canadians really hadn't ventured out far in those days. Nobody had cars. There wasn't so many roads. You could access the area by rail. But the unique landscape of Northern Ontario had yet to be painted in a manner that did it justice. These guys were considered rebels at the time, but worth looking up on the internet if you happen to choose to. The brilliant maple trees in autumn, that light up in beautiful color. Same in Quebec. The rocks, the water, it was just wonderful stuff. And that influenced a lot of my painting as well. Just watching, seeing how they did it, wow, look at that color scheme, look how they used that to recreate this. And, you learn as you go, and you watch other artists and you pick up pointers and you apply it to your own skills. One interesting point to illustrate what I'm saying, if you were to take a white shirt or a white sheet, drape it over a chair outside on a sunny day, and take a look at the colors that you see reflected in the shadows. They're not black and white gray. They are probably lavender, light peach, maybe cool blue, and so on. So you get to see how color happens and how it reacts, and how warm colors against cool colors create interest and excitement to the eye. And once you start to learn these lessons, the adding black to a color to darken it goes out the window pretty quick. But it's hard to convince people of that because they've been taught these things for so long that, it's hard to get out of that shell. I look for, and as far as landscapes go, I usually find that the perfect picture postcard view doesn't really happen. It may, but it's not always handy. Or if you do find it, it's probably raining outside or something, or it's been painted 100,000 times. So I taught myself, as I walk the dog every morning and I go through the local woods or, whatever, to not just look at the big picture, but to look down at your feet. Look at the little things that you bypass every day, things that might be really uninteresting in themselves. Even an old chain hanging off an old wooden fence on a sunny day with shadows being created, and if you close in closely, could be a beautiful subject matter. So it's all around you. You just have to train yourself to look and find it. And sometimes that, as far as landscapes, can really pay off. And if you happen to luck upon the right time of day, when the sun is shining and creating various forms of light and shadow, you have a composition staring you right in the face. I always carry my iPhone with me. I don't use it as a phone very much, but the camera portion of it I sure do, because you never know when you're going to come up and see something that's wonderful. The other thing that I have just recently started to do is move away from landscapes uh, and acrylic and go back to using gouache and watercolor. It's a little bit more fun. It's more natural to me. Uh, and searching for things other than rocks, trees, and water. I've been looking through old slides that I had collected. I visited France on 2 occasions and took a lot of photos, mainly in the Normandy area. And that is just, I'm working on a few now that are from that period and that area. And I went to Scotland at one time and got some reference from that. So that's kind of fun. You know, sort of like a travelogue kind of thing. Also, I have slides that my grandfather took, and he was back in the early 60s. Most of it is, you know, pretty boring stuff, but occasionally you can find something that if you have an imagination and the ability, you can turn it into something else. I think in some of the photos that you might see there, there's one called Prairie Gentleman, which is two guys standing next to an old tractor in a flat field with storm clouds going overhead. Originally, that photo was from an International Harvester show day somewhere with 2 guys with cowboy hats and sunglasses staring at the camera. It wasn't very interesting to look at. It was all bleached out. But by taking the figures and turning their heads, looking the other way, and completely reinventing the background, lowering the horizon line and having lots of fun with the sky, it became something entirely unique. And that can be a lot of fun. I've got some other paintings you might see there where they were weddings from somebody's wedding. I don't know. I don't know who these people were, but if you take some of the figures and their various poses and attitudes, you can put it together and get a little story or narrative going. And by adjusting the expressions on the face and then, you know, reinventing and drawing your own background, your own characters doing their own thing behind these folks. I think there's one painting there of a group of people along a dining room table or a dining hall, and it, you know, they're sort of obviously ticked off with each other. That just came from different pieces from different slides and assembled together, sort of made a little story, and that can be a lot of fun. As long as you have the ability not to get stuck relying on your reference too closely. There are really no messages or meanings in my art form. I'm not trying to make a point. I'm not trying to, you know, express my opinion of the world or anything like that. There's nothing political about it, obviously. It's just taking the everyday obvious things that you see or things that I've seen or encountered and putting them through the Gord Wilson art filter and having it come out as something unique that is unique to me. That's sort of what it's all about. The joy of creation. Anybody that's ever, you know, got involved with something, even if it's a jigsaw puzzle, once you get involved in something like that, you lose all track of time. And it's the same with painting. When I start painting and I get right into it, I can really just transport myself to another place and time. And it's, you know, time goes by pretty quick, and it's a wonderful wonderful thing to do. Even if you're just learning and starting out, it's excellent. It's a great experience. My style is very fast, uh, sort of almost post-impressionistic approach. And, always learning, always trying to find new things to do, new ways, and be critical of my own work and see my progress, chart it, etc. When I start to do a painting, I usually start with some kind of inspiration or reference. It could be a photo, a slide, a sketch. It could be something right out of my mind that doesn't exist at all. I have to work it out, usually in a little sketchbook that I carry, just little pencil linears. I have to sort of adapt it to an acceptable composition, because you never want to split your picture frame down the middle or across the middle, because that creates equal space. So you usually work with the rule of thirds and, just simple, not complicated compositions. So it could mean, enlarging certain things, moving things over a little bit, deleting certain things. So you have to make some decisions that will help your final piece. You have to know what your center of interest is. So there has to be a focal point. And I look at the focal point, think of an analogy of a stage play or a movie. The center of interest is like the main actor. And all the other elements are supporting actors. You can't have two main principal actors on the same stage or they all will be bedlam. So it's the same with a painting. If you don't have a center of interest, like something that the eye can focus on immediately, then you're going to be constantly searching and overworking your painting and trying to find something for the eye to focus on and not knowing what you're doing. And inadvertently, you wreck the painting. So you have to be sort of aware of these things. So I work it all in my head ahead of time and figure what the color scheme I'm going to use, so on and so forth. Working in watercolor or gouache, as opposed to acrylic on canvas, is a different process. I use mainly Winsor Newton brand gouache. It's a good quality stuff, good quality color. And I use Darsh brand watercolor paper, 140 pound cold press rough texture. First thing I do is I draw a picture frame 1 inch around the edge of the paper. And then I draw with a pencil, draw in what I'm going to do. Then I take a wide brush and mix up some thinned out color, usually like an amber color, or it could be a violet color, light colors. And I wash the whole thing, plenty of water, because you got to get the water paper stretched. And then while it's wet, I use push pins and pin it down along the edges into a hollow drawing board that I have and let it dry. That stretches it and keeps it nice and firm and flat. And then once that's dry, I mix up a dark color, and with a brush, I go in and I just sort of accent or go over those pencil lines, because by now they're underneath that, that color that you put down. So it's just sort of reestablishing certain lines that will sort of help guide you as you go through the painting. Once that's dry, then of course, it's just blocking in colors and sort of working with it. That's where the real creation goes on and the fun stuff, because then you start to, have fun and with color interactions and so forth. And once it's done, an important thing to know as an artist is to be able to be self-critical. When I was a young artist and something didn't work out, there was a lot of bad words and things got thrown across the room, and I would put the paintbrushes in a drawer and say, I'm never going to paint again for the rest of my life. Of course, that didn't last long. But after I went to the Ontario College of Art, I was taught to be critical in a positive sense. So if something doesn't work out quite the way you imagined, stop. Don't think of it as a failure and take it out on yourself, but think of it as a study, a sketch, a preliminary drawing. And that psychologically is a different way of thinking about it. Then you have to establish what went wrong, what went right, what could be done differently, and you take another stab at it. And then hopefully the second time around it works out. And then, you have to know when to stop. You don't want to overwork something, otherwise it won't look fresh. It'll look kind of, I'm not really into high realism. So, picking away at something kind of takes the energy out of it. So I really try to avoid that. As I say, I try to go to events and I carry the camera with me to try to capture something, and something that I can apply color to and have some fun with. Something that's too detailed or whatever is usually not going to be suitable for my style of painting. For instance, a shiny object like a sports car, it's probably not going to look great with my style of painting. And so I kind of avoid stuff like that. One little trick that I have and I've come to appreciate is if you're painting a landscape, try putting the horizon line low on your page, sort of like in the bottom third, bottom quarter of the page, whether it's a mountain range or a lake, and then use the sky as your focal point, because you can't go wrong with the sky. You can mold it, you can apply different colors, you can't go wrong. It's not like you're painting a car or a fence or a house. You can have a lot of fun with skies. And I think if you take a look at some of my paintings, you'll notice that I've had quite a good time painting skies. So that's a nice little trick that I've got. Let's see what else. Gouache to me, I like because I can use it like watercolor and I can use it thicker. It's forgiving. I can adjust it. Anybody that's worked with transparent watercolor knows that you can be 3/4 of the way through something and, make a boo-boo and it's all over. You can't fix that. So gouache is a lot more forgiving. The colors are more vibrant because it's opaque watercolor. It sits on the surface rather than sinking into the paper like watercolor does. Plus, when you're finished, instead of a big 2-inch thick canvas, you've got just a flat piece of paper, so you can store it a lot easier. And but you do need to frame it. That's the drawback. If you get it accepted in a show, you have to take it out and get it framed, and that could be a bit of a hassle with the glass and the mat and so on and so forth. Now, being an artist, how do I interact with the public and stuff like that? Well, as I've said, I'm a real homebody. I'm very introverted and withdrawn. I don't socialize much. It's just my wife, myself, and the dog, usually. So to get my stuff out there, one of the best things that's happened to me in the last couple of years was an organization here in Canada, the Federation of Canadian Artists, based out of Vancouver. And I belong to that, as well as the branch out here on the island, which would be the Aerosmith branch. They put on shows every so often, and you can submit your work, and it's judged. And if it gets accepted, then you have a chance of, well, you get it shown online and in person, depending on the level of COVID at the time, I guess. That they're wonderful folks, and they do a lot for the artistic community, and they're a godsend for Canadian artists. I have a website that should be up there on the screen when this is over. I try to keep that up to date with all my various paintings and so on and so forth, resume and all that, just in case. One of the newest things that I've got involved with was Facebook. I was kind of, I'm 63. I'm kind of old school. I wasn't really into, imaginary friends and all this that I sort of thought it would be. But when I got on it, I realized all the possibilities, the different groups. I can do a painting and have it on, 10 different groups. I've got a business page, I believe, on Facebook called Colors on the Wall, and my own page, which I have the artwork in. So and I get feedback from people, and that's always encouraging, and that makes you feel good. So Facebook is great. Also, it's brought out a little bit of a writer in me. I like to write humorous anecdotes from my life, which I have quite a few of. And I'll think about these things, in the middle of the night, and then in the morning, just sort of, type them out. So it's encouraged me to do some writing, and I have a lot of fun with that. And I can post those things, and that keeps me creative, keeps the juices flowing. Exhibitions. Getting in a gallery is a real challenge, but in St. Catharines, Ontario, there's a gallery called the TAG Gallery, TAG. They have a couple of my paintings. In Port Alberni on the island here, there's a virtual gallery called the Draw Gallery, DRAW, and they have a few pieces. And locally here, we've got, different galleries, a very artistic area that I live in, lots and lots and lots of artists. So there's lots of galleries and, opportunities to do things. One of my real passions is teaching. As I say, I was a high school teacher, and it's nice to deal with high school kids, but usually they're in your class just to get a free credit, an easy credit, I should say. And not all of them are interested in art. But teaching adults who want to learn is something that I really love. I've been doing that for quite a while because I'm self-taught as far as the fine art goes. I didn't learn any of that stuff in college. I've got a Bachelor of Design, Bachelor of Education, but none of that really taught me how to paint per se. That's something I had to teach myself and go through and make all the mistakes and learn the hard way. So, and sometimes learning that kind of painting style or learning to paint is like walking through a whole field of barbed wire fences. You're constantly getting cut up until you find your way through. Having done that, I've learned what to do, what not to do, and I can digest it down and very simply get somebody to advance their skills relatively quickly by doing away with all the, stuff that they've been taught, or issues they may have with color or composition, or and get them on the right track in their own time and space. But that's really, I really, it's really rewarding, and it's nice to see the look on somebody's face when, after a couple lessons, that they've got to a higher level. So yeah, teaching is great. COVID has sort of put a damper on that here, for the time being, but hopefully, we'll be through that and we'll carry on. And more opportunity will pop up. Lastly, and to wrap this up, I've learned lessons, as I say, and believe me, learning is a lifelong activity. It should be. Life shouldn't be that you get so far and give up and stop, because next thing you know, you're going to be yelling at the squirrels that are on your lawn and, sweeping the street. It's not worth it. There's better things to do, and teaching yourself and educating yourself, and whatever it might be. It could be sculpture, art, anything, glass blowing, there's always things to learn, and that's what makes life interesting. Another lesson is never give up, try not to be discouraged. We all make mistakes, and that goes for everybody. You have to make a mistake, and as I say, just call it a learning piece on the way, a sketch, and then move on. Expose yourself to different artists, books, galleries, exhibitions, whatever. I have duotangs, binders full of things that have inspired me and artists. I could go on and on and on, from all periods, mainly in the 20th century. And it's served as an educational and inspirational tool for me. So that's a good thing to have, and to constantly refresh it and inspire. Don't be afraid to be self-critical. We covered that. That's how you get better. And be true to yourself. Don't try to paint like somebody else, because there are all kinds of different genres of art. If I tried to do if I tried to do an abstract painting, I could do an abstract painting, but I wouldn't know the value of it. I wouldn't know if it was good or bad. I would have no idea what I was doing. So obviously that's not in my playbook. So I do what comes natural to me, and it's obvious in the artwork if you look at it, what's coming through. And the last thing I'd like to pass on is to always have fun. Art should be something you have fun and you enjoy doing. And it is a rewarding activity, very therapeutic. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can do it in groups, you can do it on your own, and you can do it when you feel like it. But have fun, and all the best of luck to all the aspiring artists out there. Anyway, take care.